Welcome everyone to another Observability Lab. Today's topic is all around access control in the context of observability. As you can see here, defining and managing fine granular access for Dynatrace. And as always in my videos, I invite the experts. Florian, servus, how are you?
Hi, servus, Andy. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to our cozy chat today.
Yeah, Cozy Chat, you have prepared a lot of stuff. Now, access control is very important because we're ingesting a lot of data, whether it's logs, metrics, traces, security events, software delivery lifecycle events, real user data. There's so much data we can ingest, but the question is, how can we control who can actually access what type of data? And this is why I'm looking forward to this. This is part one around access control fundamentals. And then we have a second one that talks more about how to scale that type of configuration in an enterprise. But Florian, you are one of the product managers on that topic. I would suggest, please take it away. I may chime in with a couple of questions, but please, let's start with access control fundamentals for observability.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Exactly as you said, main challenge in this topic is who can access what, but I would say it doesn't stop at the what. It even goes further down, like where exactly, what type of metadata, what type of records I'm allowed to access. So it's really about, as we see in the title here, fine granular access for your business to give everybody the access they need to work, but not more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And as a good introduction to the topic, I have this infographic which summarizes more or less the main duties of an admin, what to do if you want to give your users access to observability data, if you want to make your users work with Dynatrace. We have the whole field of granular access control, exactly what we said before, who can access what, but also there's a separation of responsibilities. So there are different kind of roles that are necessary to access the product in different ways. And of course, the whole factor about scalability. If you see it from a big picture perspective, we have these two topics. First of all, if we go downwards, how can I configure the granular access for my different roles in the company? On the other hand, the horizontal one, how can I then distribute those configurations across hundreds of thousands of teams, basically spanning, bringing this whole topic into my organization.
Mm.
And what we will do today in the session is really talk about the fundamentals, how to go deep, how to go fine granular, basically how can we configure the access for your users in the right way with the measures we have in place with Dynatrace.
Perfect. And folks, just a reminder, everything that you see today, there will also be links in the description of the video. And Florian, as you just said, there will be a second session around I like the horizontal scaling. So first of all, go deep and granular, but then scale it. Folks, you will also find the link to that second video in the video description. Take it away and give us a little bit more overview about the agenda.
Yeah, so the agenda today, we want to talk a bit briefly at the beginning about why access control matters. So drill a bit on the topic. What are the pain points? What are also the regulatory or business requirements in terms of access control? Then what are we doing in Dynatrace to give you the measures to do access control in the product? I will want to show you a bit of a best practice guide, how to approach the topic best, so with what to start and how to go finer. And then I would like to wrap this up all in a live demo where we're taking the use case of a mid-sized company. They are starting to use Dynatrace to improve their efficiency and operations, and how we want to basically go the admin route there and help the admin to configure certain use cases that pop up when you are basically onboarding to Dynatrace in your company. And then wrapping it up with some useful info at the end, and maybe some questions from you, Andy.
Yeah, sounds good. Cool agenda. Thank you so much. Let's start with why access control matters.
Yeah, why access control matters. I mentioned it before. There's of course a lot of business requirements. When you think about it, the first thing that comes to mind, we capture a lot of data at Dynatrace. We of course want to protect that data against unauthorized access. Because we want to protect against data breaches, but also like insider threats. So if we want to equip our users with the right privileges that they need and nothing more. There's another angle to that perspective in terms of compliance, basically, what is necessary from the regulatory perspective. And of course, where this all boils down to is arrive at what we call zero trust architecture, where we basically give everybody only the rights that are needed at that time to do a certain job. On the other side of the coin, if we look at the threats, if, for example, access control is not taken seriously, or if access control is built very broadly, so to say, that we have very broad access to the systems, we could have situations like an ex-employee retaining the access and doing no good. But also phishing everybody of us, when you're using digital systems, you can be a victim of phishing attempts. And so if you have those excessive permissions, data leaks or third parties could get know of your customer data, or that sensitive data is breached also inside of the company, so that people inside of the company, not even externally, but inside of the company, could see things that they should not see because of the breadth of data that Dynatrace is capturing. That's why we went into this direction to say we really need to provide a system where you can have every level of control to express basically in your permissions.
Yeah, and I think this is a great overview, Florian, not only for people that obviously now use Dynatrace, and we will see how this is done in Dynatrace, but in general, with your observability strategy, these are all of the questions and requirements that you have on making sure that only the data that is needed for somebody really gets into the hands, and that you not open up any type of doors, whether it's through security threats, phishing attempts, or obviously making sure that you're staying compliant with whatever compliance framework you have to adhere to. Yeah, that's a great overview. Thank you so much.
Sure. So then let's see what we in Dynatrace offer you basically to do this. And the main authorization system is built on 3 pillars. And this is, of course, what everybody's familiar is groups. So groups is your container to organize your users in bigger chunks. But then in the center of all is the policies. And the policies is our Dynatrace approach towards attribute-based access control, which is a clear differentiation from role-based access control, where basically with a policy, you can think of kind of like a law that is done in terms of driving an authorization decision, which gives you flexibility in terms of which permissions you want to grant and under which conditions you want to grant them. And this is really the central piece, which allows you to do all sorts of fine granular tuning. So when you think about resource or record level permissions, like what type of documents I'm allowed to access, what type of data I'm allowed to access, and really going down into the granularity of a per record access. I want to say, okay, I'm only allowed to see records of a certain kind based on the metadata that I'm ingesting.
I think that's, for me, a really interesting type of granularity. And one of the use cases that I've recently seen is we capture also a lot of business data that we can read. And there may be certain people are only allowed to see business data captured from within the region that they are responsible for. So let's say somebody is working in EMEA, in Europe, they're only allowed to see business data from EMEA, versus somebody in the US, only in the US. And having the ability to say, I'm allowed to see business data, but then the boundary is only for the region that I'm operating in, so that I don't have any insights that I'm not supposed to know. It's really cool.
Exactly. And since you talked about boundaries now, this is basically an additional concept, because what we've seen with policies only is there's a lot of repetition. So especially when it comes to these fine granular measures, I want to exclude a region, or I want to only include a certain type of records with specific metadata. You have this over and over again. And with boundaries, you can then decouple that basically. The partitioning, the fine granular partitioning in the policy can be decoupled and put into a separate thing called a boundary, which we then can reuse and apply over and over again to different policies.
Very cool.
Okay. To give that a bit more flesh, what other concepts are there based on what we've just seen? We have we have groups, and we have also, to make it easy for you, we provide you default groups, so that if you want to quickly get access to Dynatrace, use these default groups to get access to all environments in the account. We provide you a set of default policies. So these are predefined access. Due to the granularity, it is not that you can just go and create your own policies, because you would need to understand the full system up front, which you can, of course, can do. But to make it easy at the beginning, we provide these default policies, and actually they give you access to the product in terms of the access to Dynatrace. And there's a separate category then for data access, which we see down here, give you access to the data. What we also have is all users group. So this is a more advanced feature, but also relevant because it helps you to baseline permissions or apply global restrictions. Like, for example, the privacy topic that we talked before. You could use the all users group to baseline and say nobody is allowed to read critical credit card information or such and such. But there is a privacy team that needs to access it because it's part of their job to do that.
So that means I would then create a privacy or super admin group that has all the privileges, but the default all users group I can restrict so that everyone in the organization, except those in that specific group, cannot do certain things. Yeah, cool.
Exactly.
Yeah, perfect.
So what that shows is basically we have a lot of levels of control, but we still want to make it easy for our customer to configure all of that. Quick thing in terms of authorization systems that are currently in place. We still have access to our account management portal, which is a role-based system. We have access to classic Dynatrace, which is also a role-based system. And this is the important part, everything that's towards latest Dynatrace is steered via IAM policies. So all that we have seen before, all the default policies, all custom policies, all the conditions, all the granularity is all part of the newly established attribute-based access control system that is steered with policies. The roles are still relevant to access account management and the classic one, but the future and also all the features and all the granularity and all the important things that are necessary in today's world to do an efficient job, this is all field in policies, and that's also what we are talking in detail today. So how does this now work? I have on the left side, I have a bunch of identities. My users are organized in groups with labels Team A and Team B. On the other side, I have my resources that are acquired by Dynatrace and the services that are used, like extensions, framework, settings, and storage, where all the observability data lies. To get now access to that, I can, of course, use a standard policy, a default policy, like the standard user. But I could also create my custom policy that says has specific restrictions, for example, with a dedicated security context, which is our custom field to partition data in Grail, or we are also supporting certain namespaces from Kubernetes to have this fine granular access to the monitoring data. Or we can also say, like we've said before, I have a deny policy where I can, for example, deny access to logs which are flagged with confidential data. And here comes now the nice part about boundaries, because of course our default policies are not restricted at all because they are generic. We don't know how the customer wants to restrict it, but the boundary can be created by the customer. And in the example I see above here with boundary 1, I can actually use the standard user policy and restrict it to only allow the user to use certain apps. So I can basically restrict the features that the user is allowed to use. Another cool thing is that I can do with boundaries is that I can extract certain things out of the boundary and reuse it. So this restriction of saying, okay, I only want to have data that is labeled as with the security context beta, and I want to have data that is coming from the namespace prod US1. I can reuse that and also not only apply it to logs data, but also apply it to other default policies. So this helps you to not have to create a custom policy, but only create a boundary and reuse the default policies of Dynatrace.
That's cool. Hey, Florian, just so that I understand, and I think this is really cool because now it makes a lot of sense. We're not just talking about accessing the data, because the first example you have here is you can even specify what type of platform capabilities is a user allowed to use. For instance, App Engine, that means that somebody can open up our different apps by default. That the standard user can open up all the apps, but then you can specify with boundaries which type of users, which type of groups should have access to, let's say, the dashboard app, the notebooks app. There might be some more specific apps for site reliability engineers or for operations. So you can really specify what type of apps these individual groups can then access, and you can specify this in boundaries. And then also the second example, I love it. That means instead of having to create a lot of different variations of policies,
The same
we're
policy with the same
yeah,
permissions and different conditions. Yes, I would extract that.
that's cool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I always call it with the policy framework, you can restrict on the resource, which would be dashboards, notebooks, apps, and on the record level. So that the one would be the RESTful way, the other one would be the observability mass data way, record level restrictions. And those both things. So basically, the policy framework spans the whole platform. So everything is covered by policy. So you can express everything from a granular perspective, and then also restrict everything. We have a dedicated reference on our documentation where we show exactly what all the services are capable of restricting or steering with access control.
Cool. And last question on this. I assume we can have more than one boundary that is applied.
Yeah, there can be multiple boundaries applied, and they auto match to wherever it's possible. So if you are matching the boundary to the standard user, it's not effective because there is no match. So it will just be ignored.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much. That's super helpful.
Yeah, maybe a bit more on the granular access. As we've seen, we have these two possibilities. We can use our default policies plus our boundaries, or we can just write custom policies. The one is, and we have it here, default policies but boundaries allow you to use the default policies that are maintained by Dynatrace, so you don't have to care about new platform services coming out or platform evolving, because that's automatically being updated. And plus the boundaries gives you enough flexibility to do the granular access. But of course, there could be cases where you need this full control, where you maybe want to say, okay, actually, I'm not satisfied with the way Dynatrace envisions the standard user to be. I have a different requirement. Then you can go for custom policies. So you have the full flexibility. You can have any variations of conditions that you can think of, what the services support. But of course, it comes with an additional maintenance effort, because whenever there is a change to the platform, this needs to be reflected in your.
Of course.
Which could be also a security measure, because you want to say, actually, I don't want to always have the latest stuff. I want
of course.
good control over what. But I would say, and I come to that actually in the best practices, because let's go on to that. We have here a staged approach. So if you want to get started quickly, use the default groups. It's a very fast way for quick onboarding. Everything is pre-configured. You have access to all the environments on your account. Then come the default policies, where you basically have prepackaged permission sets that you will just add to a group to give access. You can refine that with boundaries to give you the exact access restrictions that are necessary. Then come custom policies with more flexibility. And then even further, the advanced topics like all users group, global attributes and conditions, where you can have time-based restrictions and so on. So the further you go down, the more complex it gets, but the more granular it also gets. So the point I'm trying to make is also with the previous slide is, you also have to weigh it out. What is now necessary? Do I really have these granular requirements? Because of course they come with additional configuration costs. I would say most of the use cases, and that is what was written on the previous slide, most of the use cases can actually be satisfied with default policies and policy boundaries, because they give you the flexibility on the boundary side, where you can say, I want to have my granular access expressed, but still you rely on the maintenance of the default policy of Dynatrace.
Hey, and because you mentioned it, and I'm not sure if you cover it, but you just mentioned something about time-based access as well. Does this mean you can configure certain time frames? Let's say on a weekend, nobody has access to it, or you're not allowed to have access to weekend data?
You can. It's in our documentation. Maybe we will add the link to the
Yeah.
video. We have weekday. We have specific times and dates where you can say, I want to say this access is only allowed until the following date.
Wow.
So yeah, this is also possible, and this is
Cool.
actually advanced topics that you can do with IAM that can be applied if necessary.
Awesome.
Okay, so I think this needs to be kept in mind when we are thinking about, or when we're also now going into the live demo, this regulation. Start with the default groups, go into the policies. That's basically the sweet spot. I think where most work is done. Assigning default policies, defining a set of boundaries that reflect your data. And in rare cases where you need more customization, maybe you want to add something or remove something with a deny, you want to go into custom policies, and it is a more advanced use case that I've written down.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to our live demo. Before we go into the live demo, I want to quickly give a profile of a company. So we have a retail and e-commerce company with $250 million annual revenue. They have a heavy footprint in online shopping as well as retail stores, and they want to implement now observability with Dynatrace to improve their quality and business operations. And the goal now of the admins that are tasked with this project to get Dynatrace up and running, they need to now define access control securely and effectively for the various teams which we see down here. So like in a usual company, we have an ABCD, we have an admin team, a business team, a compliance team, and a lot of developer teams. Admin team, of course, needs full access to Dynatrace and also manages the users and groups. Then we have a business team. They might not need a lot of features. This is, for example, where the restriction for apps comes into place.
Yeah.
But they need access to a lot of data because they need to do reporting, they need to do these cross-cutting things, and so on. Then we have a compliance team that needs to access sensitive data, and only they are able to read sensitive data. They also don't need a lot of features, but they need access to a very specific part of the data, which nobody else should have. And then, of course, there are these typical developer teams. They run a bunch of services. They have their data ingested from various places, and they need to take care of having their services up and running, improving them, seeing where things go south. And basically, they need partitioned access to a certain piece of Dynatrace with a lot of privileges, I would say.
I like the ABCD analogy. I think this will stuck into my head. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. So with that, I will switch over to the live demo. That would be here exactly. And actually, where we would start on the dark side here in the account management. And let's take a look first of all into account management. So when you start your Dynatrace, first thing you get is you basically get a tenant spun up. That's what we already have, and there's also some data in there ingested. But what you also get is access to account management. The first user that is being created is basically the super admin and gets all the rights. And let's take a look what we have here. And I'm now logged in as user Florian Aigner at Dynatrace.com. And I see there's another user, Florian Aigner at RBAC.com. This is my user from the developer team. And I have now the duties. First of all, this user basically has multiple roles. For now, we will basically transverse him through the different departments. So he's now an admin, and he will become a business guy, and then at the end he will become a developer. But to start off, we will take a look what the current situation is. Currently, he's still an account admin. That's wrong. So let's clear this up for now. And then let's take a look into the policies we have. And we see here what I mentioned before. These are all the Dynatrace policies. So they have been pre-created. Admin user, pro user, standard user, and we have the different Grail data access policies for accessing Grail. You can take a quick look into them. This is the raw policy language that can be also used to define your own policies if you want. Gives you the full flexibility. So the first task is that we want to get our users now in the admin team, and we want to give him access to Dynatrace. And as you remember, the first best practice was to use the default groups, and we have here the environment admins. And this group here is already pre-configured and gives you admin user rights and full access to Grail, as well as open pipeline ingest and some other things in all the tenants on your account. So this is the easiest task actually, to get that user associated with the environment admins group. I'm gonna save that. And now let's take a look into the other side. I maybe need to re-log in, exactly.
So just that while you're doing this, on the one side, you are, I think, in an incognito browser, just to show that as a super admin, you're configuring all of the policies and the boundaries. And then on this browser, you're basically logging in with one of your users that you're now showing us how we transition them from an admin to a business team to a compliance and a development team. Perfect.
Exactly.
Cool.
So we see here we have now full access to the tenant. We are an admin. We can also go into settings, change things around. So I would say the first task is achieved. We have added a new user apart from the standard user and gave him the full admin privileges. Let's take a quick look into the notebooks here. I already have created a notebook. Let's see what the monitoring structure tells us here. So I have my machine here monitored, and there's a cloud instance on Google that's doing some stuff, and it's also a web service running.
Cool.
Constantly requests are being fired. So maybe we can take a quick look onto that web instance just for completeness.
So that means you've also set up Dynatrace observability for that particular cloud instance that you have.
Exactly. I mean, the one installing the one agent was basically a few command line commands. Installed the Apache web server and made a very small website for you, Arti.
Thank you. That's good.
Yeah, so that's all running. Okay, we have observability. That's all working. Let's go to the second one. We want to now switch the Ruxit Labs user to a business team. And for the business team, what were the requirements? They don't need a lot of rights. So maybe the admins is a wrong group to use. But maybe let's take a look into the policies that we have. And what I see here is the standard user that I think would fit perfectly. Grants access to Dynatrace environment and run Dynatrace apps. I think this is what we need. Basically, it doesn't give you a lot of things to do stuff, but it basically gives you stuff to consume the platform. And this is what we're looking for. But what we also said, the business team doesn't need all those different apps here. Because they will be confused. They just want to do their job. They want to do some reporting and analysis, and that's it. So what we also will do now, as you see in the best practices, we will use a boundary, and I already created a boundary here, which says only dashboards and notebooks. And this is basically a restriction on the app ID, which says I want to allow dashboards and notebooks here. That's good. So now I go to group management, and I actually go to the business team here.
So you created that business team, I guess, earlier, or is this a default? Yeah, okay. So you created a group called business team. Perfect.
Did that before already. And what I did here is basically I added the all Grail data read access because I want to give them access to all the data because they need to maybe do some analysis. And I gave them the standard user, but on the standard user, we added the boundary of only dashboards and notebooks. It will then apply to basically to the app engine. When it's out to serve apps, it will exclude all the apps that are not part of this list that I have provided.
Cool.
So now I will remove the user from the environment admins and move into the business team. I click save. And now I need to relog in, so I sign out. Next, and has the password saved.
Mm-hmm.
And this looks good. I have now a very clean surface.
Cool.
I can go again to my notebooks. Again, on the data level, nothing has changed. I still have access to all the different instances here, as you see, still delivering the data.
Mm-hmm.
But on the app level, I only can access notebooks and dashboards.
So that means if you just search for settings, nothing would even show up. So nobody couldn't do anything. Yeah.
It is a hub actually. It's the hub entry. So this is
Yeah.
from the
But the app is gone. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
the app is completely gone, exactly.
Cool.
So if you search here, nothing is there.
Nothing is there. Yeah. Cool.
And this also gives users a very focused experience if they need it.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing for a developer team because they need a full breadth, but for a business team that just want to do some notebooks and dashboards, that's perfect.
Yeah. I typically, Florian, I've always been advising people to use launchpads, customized launchpads to show people what they need, but this goes into a much better direction because with the launchpad, they have a nice launch opportunity, but then they still have access to stuff that they should not have access to. And I really like this. This is a really great best practice. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, both options are valid because Launchpad will give you maybe a focused entry, but this is really giving you a barrier where you say, okay, this is just what you like, principle of least privilege.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, on the compliance team, we will not cover this because it's a bit more complicated and we would have to basically do a lot of fine-grained mechanics. This is where the configuration costs come into play that I mentioned before. But what I will show you afterwards when we go out of the live demo is a blueprint, how you would, maybe a bit of a teaser, how you could imagine to do this with the policy framework. Perfect. But what we still have open, we need to still transition our user into a developer now. So we go back to our group management, and here we have the developer team. And this is already also pre-configured. What I did here now, I gave him the pro user because it's the more advanced thing where you can also do workflows and so on, and where you have a bit more, where you basically have full access to Dynatrace minus the admin topics. I also did not apply a boundary here for the Dynatrace policy because the only thing that would be valid would be the restriction on apps. Right now, what I have in the boundaries, and this user needs all the apps, so this is fine. And I gave him access to Grail with all the data that he can read, but I added here a boundary for the team B. We can add any one of those. They are both similar. If we look into boundaries here, we see this is also a simple statement. It just says, okay, cool. Security context equals team A. And all the data that is currently being monitored from my machine and from the cloud instance has this data on their team A, so that it is, no, that's not right. The cloud machine is team A and my computer is actually
team B. Okay.
Team B, exactly. So what we should see is that we only have access to the cloud service anymore. So what I now need to do again, okay, I will switch again roles from my user and I move him to the developer team. Okay, and we go back here, log out again. Oh, didn't work. Yes.
That's really cool. It's really powerful. And now I also understand the next session that we do, because if you think about this at scale, if you have hundreds of development teams, you probably want to create boundaries for the individual development teams, and then you can completely automate this to Terraform or whatever.
Maybe if there's time at the end of this session, we can also discuss a bit what exotic cases might be possible with the system.
Yeah.
So we are now in the developer space, and what we see here now, we have again full access. We see all the apps. We also have settings, but settings are only in read mode, so we are not able to edit anything because we are not the admin. But
yes, that's why, because you use the pro user. Yeah, exactly.
Pro user. And when you now go to notebooks, it's still the same notebook I have, but I would rerun that query now. And you see now I only see the Google Cloud instance. All the things still work.
Yeah.
And that's of course a very easy thing. Right now we're just using the security context, but you could use the full breadth. Actually, I might show it real quick if there is time. So there's a list of primary Grail fields for permissions, and all of those are available to separate your data. And you can combine them. You can. So this is where you really start slice and dicing on the authorization layer to give really the fine granular control on the data. Plus, so this is in the Grail specific fields, and I also would like to show you real quick our. Sorry, access management. It's a bit hidden, but under policy reference, this is what I meant before. Here you see all the services with the supported conditions. So what we just saw with restricting apps is just the tip of the iceberg. There is tons of possibilities to steer features and steer services the way that they should be. And it's really a long list of things you can pinpoint exactly what the access should be. And most of the times it's maybe not necessary, but this platform was built so that you, in the future, if there is a use case, we don't have to build it, we just have to configure it.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really powerful.
Okay, I think we have achieved access to our developer team, we have achieved access to our business team, and we have achieved access to our admin team. Of course, this is now ClickOps. In an enterprise with thousands of teams, you would not do that like that, but this is what the other session will be about. What I want to do now is switch back to the presentation and also show you how you would do this with the compliance team. So it's a bit of a blueprint. And here actually would come some more advanced features into place. Like we would create actually a custom policy where I would say, okay, exactly what you said at the beginning, Andy. We need to disallow, or in our case, deny the access to the privacy-related data, which we are labeling with a specific security context. So everything that's privacy, we will deny on a broad level. So we will deny all the access to the observability data, which is like with privacy. And what you would do then, you would add another condition that actually says, and the global user group equals or doesn't equal a certain name of the privacy group. That means I can then bind this policy to the global user group, which will be executed at the service. But whenever the privacy team comes in, this policy will not be effective. And I can then go and basically grant the appropriate access for the privacy team, which would include then the privacy related data, but for everybody else in the company, it will not be visible.
Cool. Two quick things. I think you mentioned it, that this should say under the second bullet point where the user group not equals the privacy group. So you're basically denying it for everybody, but excluding it. And here we go. We're fixing it on the fly. That's how it's supposed to be done. And then the other thing that I wanted to highlight, because people may ask, what is the security context? So when you're ingesting data into Dynatrace, every data point flows through what we call open pipeline. And in open pipeline, every log, metric, every span, every business event, everything that flows in goes through a pipeline, and there you can specify based on any type of data, let's say where the data comes from, what data it contains, what the security context should be. So this is one of these specific fields that we can then use in our policies. Yeah, that's really cool.
There's a dedicated setting in the topology where you can basically say for every entity type how the security context should be populated. And for the raw data, the security context is anyway populated, and for the entity data, it depends on the selection that you make. But yes, this is one of the central pieces apart from the other Grail permissions fields that I just showed before.
Wow. Awesome.
Okay, wrap up, I would say. A few important things that I already mentioned in the course of this session, but maybe that needs some more importance, more highlighting. Of course, the more you go down in the best practices pile, whatever we call it, the more dynamic you would get, the more granular you get, but also, as I said it before, higher configuration costs. So you always have to kind of weigh it out. How granular the access needs to be. Do I need to fulfill it because of regulatory compliance perspective, or am I maybe good if I go with a default policy and add a boundary to it? That's one thing. So always weigh it out, how deep you want to go and how granular you need to be. Another thing is it's important is we have certain limits in place that should be considered. So there's a QR code where you can look that up. And also, since we are, of course, pushing our attribute-based access control system with IAM policies, we know we have a lot of customers that are still long customers that are still on the role-based system. We have a very good guide that helps you to upgrade to attribute-based access control. Please also check that out if you now felt like a taste for policies and that could be something cool you want to implement.
Yeah. And as always, these are great QR codes. We will also have those links in the description of this video, and I'm pretty sure it's easy to also find them just on the doc page. Florian, for me, and this is why I was looking forward to this session so much, because we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when the idea came up to do these videos. I really liked your explanation of saying, on the one side, you're going vertical, you're explaining everything from a standard user all the way down on how granular you can get to role-based access, or, you have the attribute-based access control, but you go all the way down. And I think this is really awesome. You opened up the eyes for me. What is a group? What is a policy? What is a boundary? And how does this work? And I liked your example where you switched a user through different roles, and we can really immediately see the effect. So that's kind of like going vertical. Now the next thing is going horizontal. So how can you scale this? And this is where we bring in another colleague to do another session. And folks, if you want to see that as well, the link, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's probably now popping up on the top right. Just click on it or find the link in the description. Florian, anything else? Any final words from you?
Looking forward for a question, a complex situation to model from you.
Cool. Yeah, no, I mean, folks, if you have questions, I'm sure questions will come up, especially with our especially with our larger accounts. I think one way to get in touch with us, leave a comment on the video or go to community.dynatrace.com, leave a comment there, ask questions. As you can see, we definitely have the right people in the organization that can answer questions, and are looking forward to these examples. But Florian, thank you so much for today, and
thanks for having me.
Yeah, and always happy to have you, and I'm sure there will be more stuff coming out from your team that we'll cover in future videos. See ya.
Thanks, Andy. Bye-bye.
Bye.